If you've ever woken up wide awake at 3 a.m. for no reason, your ancestors did the exact same thing every single night on purpose for most of human history. For most of human history, nobody slept in one long block. Not 8 hours straight, not 6 hours straight. People went to bed not long after dark, slept for a few hours, woke up in the middle of the night, stayed awake for a while, then went back to sleep until morning. 2 sleeps every single night. And almost nobody today even knows this used to be normal. A historian named Roger Ekirch spent over a decade digging through old records looking for something else entirely. What he found instead changed how we understand human sleep completely. Diaries, court testimonies, medical texts, household manuals, hundreds of documents from all across pre-industrial Europe, casually mentioning something called first sleep and second sleep, as if everyone already knew exactly what that meant. A doctor's notes might mention a patient waking during their first sleep. A court record might note a crime committed sometime between the first sleep and the second. Nobody explained the phrase. Nobody needed to. It was as ordinary as mentioning breakfast. It even shows up in literature people still read today. In Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote, written in the early 1600s, a character is described having already taken his first sleep before continuing on with his night. The phrase passes by without any explanation at all, because 17th century readers didn't need one. It was simply how nights worked. So what did people do during that strange gap in the middle of the night? Quite a lot, actually. Some prayed quietly. Religious texts from the period specifically recommended this exact window for prayer, since the mind was calm and the house was silent. Some talked softly with a partner lying beside them, the kind of conversation that never quite happens during a busy day. Some got up entirely, tended a dying fire, checked on animals, or did small simple chores that didn't require full daylight. Some had sex. Multiple historical sources actually recommend this specific window for it, on the logic that a person was rested from the first sleep, but not yet groggy with fatigue, supposedly the ideal state for conceiving a healthy child, according to the medical thinking of the time. Some simply lay there, awake, thinking, planning the next day, turning over a problem in their mind, slowly, with nothing else demanding their attention. Some people even got dressed and visited neighbors in the middle of the night, a completely normal thing to do, apparently, in a world with no clocks pushing everyone toward a single expected bedtime. Here's the part that makes this make sense immediately. Before artificial light, night was long, genuinely long. In much of Europe, especially during winter, darkness could stretch for 14 hours or more, sometimes longer the farther north you went. Nobody's body is built to sleep for 14 straight hours in one unbroken block, so the body did the next best thing. It split the night in half. This wasn't some strange cultural quirk unique to Europe either. Segmented sleep shows up in historical and anthropological records from many different regions entirely unconnected to each other, which strongly suggests it isn't a habit humans invented. It's something closer to a default setting, one that modern life simply built over. In the 1990s, a psychiatrist named Thomas Wehr ran an experiment that accidentally proved this old pattern was real and biological. He placed a group of volunteers in a room with 14 hours of darkness every night, for weeks with no artificial light allowed, mimicking what winter nights looked like before electricity existed. At first, the volunteers slept in one messy, exhausted block, catching up on modern sleep debt. But after about a month, something remarkable happened. Their sleep spontaneously split into 2 distinct segments, separated by 1 to 3 hours of quiet, calm wakefulness in the middle of the night. Nobody trained them to do this. Nobody told them to. Their bodies simply reverted to it once given the darkness and the time to settle into it naturally. During that middle waking period, the volunteers weren't stressed or anxious. Hormone measurements showed something closer to a meditative state, elevated prolactin, the same hormone associated with calm and relaxation. Their bodies weren't malfunctioning during that gap. They were doing exactly what human bodies may have done for most of our species' history. Wehr's study only involved a small group of volunteers, and sleep scientists are still debating exactly how universal this pattern really was. But the core finding has held up surprisingly well across follow-up research. Give a human body enough uninterrupted darkness, with nothing artificial pushing bedtime later, and segmented sleep tends to show up on its own, without anyone teaching it to. This pattern shows up well beyond old European records too. Some modern hunter-gatherer and small-scale societies living without electric light, studied by researchers in places like Africa and South America, show remarkably similar sleep patterns, broken into segments rather than one continuous block, closely tracking the natural rhythm of darkness rather than a fixed clock-driven schedule, which makes the case even stronger. This isn't a European habit from one particular century. It's very likely a shared, deep human default, something closer to our biological baseline before modern light rewired it. To be fair, not every study agrees completely. A well-known 2015 study looked at 3 modern hunter-gatherer and small-scale societies in Africa and South America and found that most people there actually slept in a single consolidated block most nights, not clearly split into 2, Researchers still debate exactly how universal segmented sleep really was, and whether it depended heavily on things like climate, season, or how long and cold the local nights actually got. What almost everyone agrees on, though, is this. Sleep before artificial light was far more flexible, far more responsive to actual darkness, and far less rigidly scheduled than the tightly boxed 8-hour block most of us treat as the only acceptable option today. Whether split into two neat phases every night or not, ancient sleep bent around nature. Modern sleep bends around a clock. So what actually broke this pattern? Artificial light. Specifically, the rapid spread of it. Gaslighting, spreading through cities in the 1800s, kept people up later, shrinking the natural window of darkness. Then electric lighting arrived and shrank it even further. Streetlights, household bulbs, eventually screens glowing directly into people's eyes right before bed. As artificial light expanded, the long dark night that made two separate sleeps necessary simply disappeared. People started going to bed later and later, closer to when they actually felt tired, and with a shorter window of darkness available, there was no longer enough time or need to naturally split sleep into two phases. One consolidated block became the new default, not because it was biologically superior, but because it was the version that fit a shorter, brighter night. Within a few generations, segmented sleep faded from mainstream cultural memory entirely. By the 20th century, almost nobody remembered it had ever been normal. It simply became a lost habit, quietly erased by the light bulb. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you a little. That 3 a.m. wide awake for no reason moment, the one that so many people today assume is insomnia, a sign something is wrong with their sleep, might actually be an ancient, completely normal biological pattern trying to resurface. Modern sleep advice tells people to panic about it. Get back to sleep immediately. Don't check the time. Avoid screens. Take supplements if it keeps happening. All reasonable advice for modern life, to be fair, since most of us do need a full consolidated block before an early alarm. But it's worth knowing that this exact experience was, for the overwhelming majority of human history, not a malfunction at all. It was simply Tuesday night. Some sleep researchers now genuinely wonder whether a portion of modern insomnia complaints are actually this old biological pattern quietly reasserting itself against a modern schedule that has no room for it anymore. Not a disorder, a mismatch between an ancient body and a modern clock that never asked for its opinion. This isn't just a fun historical footnote. Understanding this pattern has real implications. If waking briefly in the night is sometimes a normal biological rhythm rather than a malfunction, then the anxiety many people feel about it, the frustration, the racing thoughts about tomorrow's exhaustion, might be making the experience worse than the waking itself ever was. Some sleep clinicians have actually started incorporating this history into how they talk to patients, gently reframing occasional nighttime waking as potentially normal rather than automatically pathological, especially for people who wake calmly, stay awake briefly, and fall back asleep without much struggle. For people with genuine chronic insomnia that disrupts daily life, that's still worth addressing with a professional. But for the person who simply wakes once, calmly, for 20 quiet minutes and drifts back off easily, it may be worth remembering that this exact rhythm kept humans rested for most of history, long before anyone worried about it at all. Some sleep researchers even suggest a gentle practical takeaway here. If you wake in the night and can't immediately fall back asleep, resisting the urge to panic, check your phone, or calculate exactly how many hours of sleep you have left might matter more than the waking itself. A calm, dark 20 minutes of quiet thought was, for most of human history, simply part of a normal night. The stress response we've attached to it might be the newer, stranger part, not the waking. Every normal 8-hour sleep block you've ever assumed was natural is actually a relatively recent invention built by gas lamps and light bulbs, not by human biology. For most of the time humans have existed, the night wasn't one long sleep at all. It was two, or something flexible enough to bend around real darkness rather than a rigid clock nobody had invented yet. If this changed how you think about your own sleep, subscribe, because this channel covers exactly this kind of surprising, real history every week. And now I'm curious, have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, wide awake, for no obvious reason? Let me know in the comments, because based on everything we just covered, you might not be broken at all. You might just be sleeping like your ancestors did, one quiet, dark night at a time.